Welcome to another episode of Political Roots. Today's guest is a distinguished senior editor at The Bulwark. You've read his work at the Weekly Standard, the Washington Post, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and the Cleveland Plain Dealer. He's worked for Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee and the Finance Committee, and he's just been a pretty good friend. This is my buddy Jim Swift. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for
having me. How you doing, man? Yeah, thanks for coming. Good. How are you?
Welcome to my mausoleum of good Republicans.
I was just gonna say we got some Warner back there, some McCain. Ooh, Trump wouldn't like that.
Yeah, no, it's a wall of mostly dead former good Republicans.
Which is the perfect way to start this show. I asked Joe Walsh the same question. What the hell is going on with the Republican Party?
There was a meme, because, there's always a meme from the early Trump days with the racist Pepe the Frog, right?
Yeah.
And he is on a train. It was a well done cartoon, and the guy's got a little MAGA hat, and he goes, "Mr. Trump, there are no brakes on this train. There are no brakes on the Trump train." And the party is so sufficiently melded to him that, you don't really have any choice but to see if it crashes or if it just runs out of steam and comes to a stop. You're along for the ride, no matter what, unless you choose to become Joe Walsh or Jim Swift and join the apostasy of people who think that Joe Biden would make a better president, again. But that's really all the choice that is a pundit or a politician. And that's why you see so many House Republicans retiring is, they can at least kind of get off the ride with a parachute by retiring, right? They're still associated with it, but it's not their job anymore.
But every time Republicans get the chance to jump off the Trump train, it feels like they never take it. I mean, look, the indictment. The indictments were the perfect opportunity for them to say, look, we cannot have a guy who's under federal indictment be the standard bearer of our party. But they did just the opposite. They embraced him even further.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're trying to make perfect the enemy of the good, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Trump train never stops, if we're sticking with this analogy, but it may slow for a big curve and make it easily where you could just jump off the train. They're saying, well, no, the Trump train actually has to stop for me to get off it. Like they can't take any opportunity to do it because they're too afraid. Just look at the graveyard of. I don't have any Jeff Flake stuff here, but I should. I should get some
Jeff Flake.
Yeah,
Jeff Sessions.
Yeah.
Everyone Trump touches ends up 10 times worse than when they started out, but they continue to go to him. I mean, the amount of Republicans we've heard.
Dean Heller,
yeah,
he might as well be a ghost. Dean who, right? Jeff, like these, they've all been trampled kind of by, Trumpian news cycles ever since. And these are great guys, but no one wants to be like them. So they're just going to say, well, it hasn't completely stopped. I can't get off. And they're not going to go the woke Joe Walsh, woke Jim Swift route, so to speak.
But even the Republicans who find an inkling of political courage to stand up to Trump, when they're asked the follow-up question, okay, you say Trump is a horrible person, you say that he's unfit to be president, will you vote for him again? Their answer is always yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, because if they answer no, then they become kind of Larry Hogan territory. They've just, it's kind of a choose your own adventure of how do you wish to be, not remembered. Spoiler alert, even the people who went along with it aren't going to be really remembered. It's all just going to be Trump in jail at some point. And, doesn't matter your degree of complicity. You're not going to be remembered in the era of Trump, I don't think. There aren't going to be many other non-Trumpian names.
We weren't alive during the Nixon days, but it feels kind of like the functional equivalent to Nixon going down and the Haldermans and all the people around him are the Janet Ellises and the Rudy Giulianis. And
yeah, you really have to be a student of history people like you and me will remember, Stephen Miller, which one, which bad one. We'll remember all of these kind of nobodies, but it is Nixonian in a way that, you really have to be a student to know who, Dean or Halderman or, any of these, folks are, or maybe you watch the recent HBO miniseries,
which was good.
Yes, I thought it was very
I
good.
recommend it.
Yes, co-sign.
Yeah, there you go. Yesterday in Trump's appellate hearing, his attorney was asked if Trump took SEAL Team 6 and used them to assassinate uh, a political opponent, would he be immune from criminal prosecution? And his attorney said yes. That ups the ante on Trump's comment that he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it. At what point do Republicans admit that they are just slow walking themselves into an actual dictatorship? And not themselves, walking the country into a dictatorship.
Yeah. I mean, geez. Between that and the allegations that Roger Stone was, dabbling in, assassin talk, or these are just reports, but like,
mm-hmm.
Still, like, the connection between Donald Trump and Roger Stone. I mean,
they're hand in hand.
It's not a conspiracy. They're, they are still very much buds. So that's. But you asked, at what point will they admit to themselves? And I don't think that any of them will. I mean, maybe some of them will if we fast forward to a dystopian future where Trump won again. You and me are in various camps.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're definitely in prison.
Yeah, hopefully mine has Wi-Fi.
I just want my own toilet.
I'm trying to get
I don't want to share
the rad trads to get me in a Wi-Fi camp, right? But in that future, where really, we've kind of seen implementations of, Project 2025. They've redone the administrative state, and some, appointee at DHS takes it too far with, some camp or something, right? For immigrants, people seeking asylum. That's the point where some of them might be like, you know what, we actually did kind of enable autocracy, didn't we? That's the only point. And they'll never admit it to anyone but themselves as they like resign, to be,
like Josh Hawley. Is Josh Hawley going to look up one day and be like, holy shit, we're in the middle of a dictatorship? How will that happen?
No, he's going to raise his fist, to the proles. We're getting all 1984 here.
There we go. I was going to say, we're getting real historic right here.
Yeah.
So we've got the debate between Nikki Haley and DeSantis, the kiddie stage, going on tonight. My big question is, why haven't DeSantis and Haley, and you kind of answered this earlier, but why hasn't there been more of a push about Trump not participating in these debates? Because if I'm Nikki Haley, the fact that I'm debating DeSantis and Trump just gets to sit back and watch, it almost has this, and I hate to use this analogy, but in the segregation cases, they said separate but equal treatment changes the mentality of everyone, and it makes them think that the separate treatment means, they're different people. Yeah. The same can be applied in a very loose way to the debates, and the networks, the party, everyone just allowing Trump to not have to participate in debates. I mean, that in and of itself seems like a campaign donation.
Yeah, it very much is in kind. And I mean, look, this is still a party that's paying his legal debts. That's
insane.
It's, to say that the disinterested here, I mean, I didn't want to believe, and didn't for a long time, that Nikki Haley wasn't auditioning to be Trump's VP. I'm kind of coming around to that. My colleague Jonathan Last kind of made that point recently. I think he made that point in the Atlantic, or maybe it was Vanity Fair, somewhere that he published outside of the Bulwark. But I'm coming around to that belief that it really is an audition. And, Tim Scott, he left the race before I could change my mind. I didn't think he really wanted to be Trump's VP as much as many people wanted to make him out to be. But I think Haley...
You're going to carry a lot of weight if you're Trump's VP. Mike Pence has proved it is a life or death job.
Yeah, and DeSantis clearly isn't running to be VP, right? As much as I don't like him and he's a horrible robotic candidate, and this was all predictable. Like, he was never a good campaigner.
Everybody who spent any time in Florida around Ron DeSantis knew once people got to know him, it was all going to fall apart.
Yeah, he reminds me of the robot scene from the movie Euro Trip.
Yep.
like that's just him, like looking at voter. It's so bad. But he say what you want about him. He's not running to be VP and never has.
No. I mean, it helps when you could go back and be governor of Florida.
Yes.
Like governor of Florida or VP of the United States. I'm going to take governor of Florida.
Yeah, and I'm sad. Christie is who's in my heart of hearts, who I want to support, but as a nominal Republican, I left the party after January 6th, but I'm not a Democrat. I'm not an independent. I am what I am.
Just out there. Yeah.
Yeah. But look, there's not going to be a Democratic primary in here in Virginia where I live. I'm going to vote for whoever is the most rising in the polls shot to actually beat Trump person. Now, I don't think anyone has a real shot to beat Trump. I don't, barring unforeseen health events or him doing something that results in him being locked up physically behind bars for more than a day. Outside of those things, Trump's going to be the nominee. So, but if Nikki Haley's on my ballot and she's got a better chance than DeSantis, I'm going to vote for her, right? But it's really a question of between those two who are still on the debate stage, who's going to drop out first? I mean, really,
should Christie get out of the race now so that they can coalesce around either Haley or DeSantis? I mean, it seems like Haley. I talked to people in New Hampshire who are Democrats, and there's a push for Democrats to come over and vote for Haley in New Hampshire to boost her because you can vote in either primary. It's open primary,
right?
And if DeSantis, that's not going to happen. Democrats are not going to vote for DeSantis in that primary, but Haley they would. And if she wins New Hampshire, I mean, that's a different race, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks that Christie should stay in as long as he is financially viable, because his goal is to get the other candidates to get somewhere close to his messaging, like remotely close. And he's failing at that, unfortunately. I think that's why he should stay in. But if he gets out, everyone thought...
He's got no overhead. There's no reason financially for him to get out. He's not running a stereotypical campaign. It's like him and 3 consultants.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think he should.
Yeah, especially not after standing behind Trump in that just self-immolation that was an endorsement in 2020.
If Christie gets out, I think maybe now he just says, look, I'm not endorsing either of them. I think either of them would be an improvement over Donald Trump as the nominee, and, you should pick one of them if you supported me. But, you should also demand better of them because, I ran because I was telling the truth and no one else was. That's why I'm not endorsing either of them, because neither of them are really telling the whole truth about Trump, blah, 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 blah. But, you should pick one of them because, either of them are better than Trump. I think that's the one way Chris Christie could get out and make an impact on the race without having to endorse.
It's going to be interesting. I think he's going to end up just being a surrogate, just kind of the guy who he didn't really get out, but he shows up on CNN, MSNBC, and kind of, like you said, is the anti-Trump messenger, but isn't popular. It's kind of like he's the woke uncle at Thanksgiving who you're just like, all right, I get it, like climate change.
He's like the anti-Jeffrey Lord, who got the CNN contract for being Trump before it was early. Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of this is like rehab for Christie, but for folks like him, Liz Cheney, and Adam Kinzinger, my view is, unless you plan to be on stage as a surprise guest in Chicago at the DNC, unless you're going to make that endorsement at the end of the day, it's to what degree are you trying to rehab your image?
Would that endorsement even matter though at this point? Like having Liz Cheney endorse Joe Biden, I don't know really any Democrats. Endorsements don't really matter anymore, do they?
I think it does matter. I worked on the Republican Voters Against Trump project in 2020, which, my colleague Sarah Longwell basically, I'm sure will be doing it again. Republican Voters Against Trump. It does matter to some voters, right? Because we're really only talking about 15,000 or less voters in 5 states, right? In each of these 5 states. Yeah. And, I think it does matter to have, people actually endorse Joe Biden as opposed to just say vote your conscience, but don't vote for Trump. I'm writing in the ghost of Ronald Reagan, like Larry Hogan, what's the use of that? What's the use of Larry Hogan being a commentator?
Well, No Labels would tell you that him and Joe Manchin running as a third party, and ending democracy as we know it.
Yeah. No.
Do you think they'll do it?
No.
You know how much I despise Joe Manchin. I just Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are two people that just
yeah. Well, I have longstanding anti-Kirsten Sinema views. She and Nancy Mace a lot alike. But like I knew her before she was truly famous, and she was just kind
of. Sinema is honest about who she is.
Yeah, I mean that's there is a
at this point
of transparency. Yeah, but she also holds the seat my boss used to hold. So like, I kind of really have a special thing have it out for her. Not a fan.
Outside of like some K Street lobbyists, I don't really know who is a fan of her at this point.
Well, I mean, Arizona is going to be an interesting race. I mean, I like Gallego very much. And I don't even agree with his politics. I love his honesty.
So I actually have a great Gallego story. So Gallego and I were, I'm in Florida. I'm working with a pack, and I'm with Common, the rapper. We're like knocking doors, and we've been doing it in Florida for a couple hours. It's hot, it's muggy, and this guy who had been helping us knock doors leaves for a little while and comes back with boxes and boxes of Jimmy John's. And we sit down, we eat. He's like making sure everybody's fired up. We go back out, and I'm like, that guy's really awesome. Like, I wonder, whatever campaign he's helping out on. And someone looks at me and goes, that's Congressman Gallego. And he never introduced himself as a congressman. And he's kind of a smaller guy in stature.
Yeah.
But he's just a fun, carefree, just like nice, good dude. And I don't know how that race doesn't end up with him winning. I mean, you got Carrie Lake, who's just a psychopath.
Yeah. He reminds me, and you will initially hear this comparison and think it's an unfavorable one. Josh Mandel.
Ooh, you're going to have to explain that one.
So I've known Josh Mandel since I was 16. And that current Ruben Gallego and Lyndhurst City Councilman Josh Mandel have a lot in common. And so I see a big upwards trajectory. And then, of course, Josh Mandel quickly went into the treasurer's race and then, started getting into the political dark arts. And then, on his second and third Senate runs, we saw there was no bottom to Josh Mandel. He started out as a super optimistic guy who would put his worn out shoes on, tacks on his office wall. There's no door he wouldn't knock. And, like super like positive and infectious kind of football quarterback, captain of the, party enthusiasm. I see that kind of similarity between them. So I think that means only an upward rise for Gallego if he's going from a House seat to a Senate seat. So,
it's interesting when we look at the landscape for 2024. You would think Democrats would be blowing out Republicans right now. I mean, you had McCarthy get removed as speaker. Now Chip Roy is talking about whether or not there's going to be removing of the new speaker. Is there going to be a shutdown? Is there not going to be a shutdown? You got Trump. Like, this seems like a landscape for Democrats to have an absolute blowout. But there's questions about whether or not, Democrats could lose by 5 or 7 in Michigan, and the down ticket race. Like, just how is this looking like such a disaster given the climate?
I mean, it's easy for Republicans to be unified at this point, even though there is still the open question. Well, what degree by which will Trump be the nominee? That's really the only question. But, Biden had, I forget who said this, but I recently saw somebody had a quote about incumbents, and they have to rebuild their coalition. It's kind of a common misconception that Biden, the coalition that got Biden was only there on election day, and that coalition ended that same day, before polls even closed, right? It was a singular act. And Biden got a lot of Republican votes that he's going to have to bring back in, right? In those 5 states. And he's going to have to bring over other people to counter the kind of, ceasefire pro-Palestinian, coalition that he's definitely going to lose, that is going to vote for Robert Kennedy or Donald Trump, just to stick it to Biden, right?
Yeah, I have a couple friends who are in Georgia and in Michigan, and hearing them talk about how upset they are with the president's lack of calling for a ceasefire. And these are people who aren't anti-Israel. Like, they very much are supporters of Israel, but just believe at this point we've gotten to a point where we've got to stop the humanitarian crisis. And everybody's going to come together and figure out some sort of solution other than what's going on. And that is ripe for, 1% of voters to stay home, which then in an election that's decided by 15,000 voters is the difference between democracy and no democracy.
And I also, for as much as they are, I believe, legitimately concerned about the human rights abuses that Israel does commit against Palestinians in Gaza, not keeping Joe Biden in office, can you imagine the horrors? Donald Trump would go along with the nutty far-right ministers, who are like, a standard deviation or two away from what Netanyahu wants. And Netanyahu's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And he's been kind of lawless, and he's got this weird fractured coalition.
He's trying to avoid prison just like Trump.
Yeah, Trump is going to go along with those guys, and they're going to be like, hey, we got a great idea. How about a complete and total, like, very public genocide? And Trump would be like, it's going to be the greatest genocide the world's ever seen. That's what happens.
That's true.
And, no offense to your friends. I have some friends like that too, who, I've known their voter trajectory because they worked in politics. So I've kind of watched them vacillate, and they're off on Biden on this, and they don't like Trump, but I'm like, you're not seeing what reality could be like if you just decide to stick it to Biden because he's insufficiently good for you on this issue, which I get is important.
When you won the battle, but you lost the war.
It gets way worse for your issue if you just make a symbolic no vote on Biden and he loses because of that. It gets way worse for that issue. So, like, I don't understand how they can't, like, hit pause and, like, look 2 steps ahead about what the alternative is. It's
kind of like, it's the Hillary thing, Yeah. I don't like Hillary. I really don't like Trump, but I just don't like Hillary, so I'm going to stay home.
Yeah.
And that's the third option, is what should terrify Democrats.
Yes.
It's that people will stay home. Because I hear from a lot of people, especially, and it's something I've been talking a lot about the show, African-American men, and African-Americans in general, staying home. Latino men staying home. People of color. There is a belief among Democrats that people of color will just show up, that the alternative is so bad that we'll show up. That's not going to happen. Like, there has to be a waking up, because I hear from African Americans all the time that are just like, we keep showing up and nothing's getting better for us. We keep getting told that if we don't show up, it's going to get so much worse, and it's getting worse. So the question becomes, at this point, why keep showing up?
Yeah. I mean, it does. It falls to a lot of folks. And I struggle with this because, a lot of our readers are like, why does it keep falling to Democrats to keep saving democracy time and again and again and again? And I don't think there is a good answer. Then you just kind of have to, it's sort
somebody's got to do it.
It's like D-Day and Bastogne, we may be surrounded, and sometimes the answer is nuts. And, we got a cold winter ahead, but
winter is coming.
Winter is coming, and it's not just this cycle. We got midterms after that, because it's just never going to end. It's
kind of like your drunk friend in college that you always had to take care of on a Friday night.
It's like,
why do you keep having to take care of them? It's like, because that's my drunk friend and I love him.
Yeah.
America's our drunk friend.
Yep.
We take care of her because we love her.
And it's Groundhog Day, like here. Punxsutawney again. It's Groundhog Day every election, unfortunately, until Republicans start getting the point, which is, the scary part was how close they came in places like Maryland and Pennsylvania to having governors who were legitimate election deniers who ran on that. Thankfully, they lost, but not by enough. Republicans haven't gotten the message.
How do you think the court case plays out? Excuse me. Do you think he's able to delay it through the election in hopes that he, can win and, I don't know, either
Escape.
get the DOJ to drop the federal charges and he's immune while he's in office from the state charges? Like, is this going to have an effect on the election? Because I keep hearing people say, I'm with Trump unless he gets convicted. First it was, I'm with Trump unless he gets indicted.
Yeah.
Then it's, I'm with Trump unless he gets convicted. Who are these people who are just leaving Trump if he gets, like, if it's kind of like the election in general to me is a turnout election. No one's questioning who they're going to vote for. If you're questioning who you're going to vote for, you're not going to vote. Like, and most people aren't voting for Biden. They're voting against Trump.
Yeah.
Like, there are not a lot of people who wake up every day and are like, you know what? Joe Biden, I'm so excited to vote for him. And that's okay. Like, I think to some degree, Democrats need to embrace that and be like, yeah, like, we are not trying to win a popularity contest. We're trying to save the country.
I mean, with all these people saying about lines about him being indicted, that's the line that they'll cross. I mean, they're playing a game of just the tip, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, sorry to get dirty, but it's
no, man, that's like dead on.
That
just kind of pregnant.
Yeah, that they're always going to go along with it, and there should be no doubt that they're going to go along with it. But I think that if Trump does get indicted, and I think he will, before the election,
You mean convicted?
Convicted. Sorry, in one of these cases. I think one will make it. I think at least one conviction will make it in before the general election. It will just confirm that Joe Biden is going to win.
So you think once if he has a conviction, you think the poll numbers adjust?
Yeah, I mean, just make no mistake. Republicans will go along with Trump as the nominee, convicted or not. Right.
Independents will flee.
Right.
If he's convicted.
But the party and the state apparatus, he will remain on the ballot. He will be the nominee, and most Republicans will go along with it. But it will permanently cement any question. Like Joe Biden will lead in polls by 5. The margin of error will be 3. That'll jump to 11. It'll be a foregone conclusion, and Republicans will go along with it because Trump will demand it, and he will have another stolen election narrative that he will spin. But
the down ticket bloodbath that would happen as a result of that. I mean, Democrats are already running using abortion as a sledgehammer on Republicans.
Yeah.
But, if you now have a convicted top of the ticket and you're questioning whether or not this guy is going to be serving from prison, like,
yeah,
we haven't even seen the discovery that's come out in Jack Smith's case, but like,
it's going to be nuts.
What is about to happen? I know every election we say this is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
But this is like real deal. My worry is, does he foment so much violence and chaos that we're left in a situation where he basically gets to negotiate his way out of this as a promise of not calling for a full-on war? And I know that sounds crazy and conspiratorial, but that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
He said the other day that if he loses this election because of the cases, it will be bedlam.
And maybe Biden will pardon him. I mean, we're
oh my God, can you imagine? People would lose
throw that
their
onto the
shit.
Yeah, but we are going to be in this alternate reality where Trump will be convicted of something, and every down ballot Republican running for office will turn into Mitch McConnell at the press conference. I'm not going to engage on the discussions of the presidential election. That's my position. I'm not going to engage on it. And it'll be, we'll cross this bridge when we come to it, because they can't and won't endorse Biden. Maybe a couple of them will, but that's still a death sentence. But we will go through with this abortive campaign. Trump will be the nominee. He will be.
This is the train, and we're on it, and it is going. We're gonna ride this thing till the rails fall off.
Yeah,
and but you can see that there's a point where there's no track anymore.
Yeah. Wile E. Coyote, but maybe they're counting on it being Back to the Future too.
I think they're counting on us being so afraid of the car crash that we build more of a track. It is the true hostage taking mentality. I've got the hostages. I will kill all of us if you don't give me what I want. And Trump's got basically our democracy, kind of, because that his people do they go back to being Republicans after he's gone?
I think if we're using hostage analogies, Charlie Sheen's The Chase, where he
what a great movie,
where he holds her
hostage. She became a little nutty.
Yes,
yeah, she became nutty afterwards, but
yeah,
classic movie,
very good movie. But yeah, I think it's more like that though. It's like a car hostage. It's just they're assuming they live politically. And
who hasn't fallen in love with someone who kidnapped them from a 7-Eleven?
Exactly. But Thomas Massey, he's going to keep his job. I mean, with all I referred to it earlier, with all these retirements, all the people who still want the jobs, like Lauren Boebert, will ostensibly still have them, even though they're going to have to switch districts and do all these other sorts of things. Imagine switching districts to try and stay in the House.
Publicly just being a carpetbagger. And why? Why at this point, why do you even want to be in the House? Who wants to run for election at this point? You got to be a psycho.
As a former House staffer, I have a friend who's running for office in Missouri, and she's too far gone on the Trump stuff for me to even be like, but it's a question I do ask my friends, like Harry Dunn, why do you want to be a House member? I love you. Like, I'm rooting hard for Harry Dunn, but why do you want that?
For those of you that don't know, Harry Dunn is former Capitol Police officer who on January 6th was attacked, and is now running for Congress.
Yes, and I'm rooting very hard for him. But I do. Next time I see him, like at the principal's first conference next month, I'm going to be like, "Are you really sure you want this job?"
Yeah, you got to be a little bit of a masochist, mostly because of fundraising.
Yeah,
because that's really what causes all of this.
You spend all of your time doing that, and it's your ability to make a difference is very small.
And so much of what you say is tied to fundraising.
Yeah,
like if we got rid of political fundraising and just capped elections at a certain amount, which will never happen.
Yeah,
because an entire industry of lobbyists and influence would disappear.
I think he needs to, in his campaign ads, go dun 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 dun, with his name, and then just have him being there like imposing, and then because he already did one that kind of simulated January 6th. There needs to be one where he comes up behind Jim Jordan, dun 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 dun.
I think you have written his ad for him.
Yeah,
I think this is perfect. I asked Joe Walsh this question in closing, and I'm going to ask you, is this democracy really worth saving at this point? Given how broken it is it worth it? And how do we do it?
Yes, it's worth it. I mean, if you want, I'm not going to give you the impassioned America love story version of why, but it's like if your HOA was borderline insolvent, and do you let it go insolvent and then rebuild, because it's actually very hard to rebuild. So it's more not about what your country can do for you, but I don't think people have really thought through how hard it would take to functionally rebuild governance on this scale. And for that reason alone, of course, democracy is worth saving. So it's less a romantic answer and more a practical one. It would be absolute chaos, like a disaster movie level chaos, if we just gave up on democracy.
And the last part of that question was, can we actually save it?
Yes, we can.
This is an experiment.
But we have to do it every election, apparently.
Every single election. Jim Swift, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Everybody learned a lot, and we will definitely be having you on again.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much, man. And that's a wrap on another episode of Political Roots. I'm your host, Michael Starr Hopkins. I want to thank our guest, Jim Swift of the Bulwark, for joining. I want to thank you guys for continuing to listen. And as we figure this whole thing out, this podcast, this election, I just want to thank you, because we're going to do this thing together. Till next time, take care.